Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we are getting ready to smoke a chuck roast, a beef chuck roast, and I wanted to do a video on this first of all to show more use and technique of the Hasty Bake Roughneck Smoker, but also because chuck roast is a really great piece of meat to smoke. To me it's as good as brisket. It's about a third to a half the cost, and it's a more manageable cut of meat, certainly better for small groups and small families. And so I thought it was a really good idea to do a video on chuck roast as a meat to smoke, and then we'll see the process of how it works out. Right now I've got the Hasty Bake Roughneck Smoker starting up. I've got a full load of hardwood lump charcoal in the firebox. I only lit the front half of it, and that gives us a combination of temperature control and duration. Okay, we need the full box of charcoal to go 4 to 6 hours, which is what it's going to take to smoke this piece of meat. But we want to keep the temperature down. We want to be cooking low and slow, so we really only want to light part of that charcoal to begin with. And so that's what I've done here. I've lit the front half of that firebox. I've been running it for about 10 minutes now with everything wide open, and I'm going to get ready now and shut things down, start to adjust the vents to control my temperature, and then we'll put the piece of meat on there. So stick around and we'll get started. All right, so here's our chuck roast, and I've had this in the fridge overnight. Last night I put on a coating of yellow mustard and then salt, pepper, and some barbecue rub, and I've had that in the fridge overnight, open to the air. So that's, basically 12 to 14 hours in the fridge like this. And what that's going to do is the salt is going to draw some moisture out of the meat. That's going to enhance our bark, and simultaneously as that happens, the flavor of the salt and the rub and the pepper gets drawn back into the meat. So this is kind of an important step when smoking a cut like this. It enhances flavor, it enhances your bark, and it's a good thing to do. So just to give you an idea, cost, this chuck roast was $17 at Walmart. Right next to it were some briskets that were $53, and they were, a larger surface area but thinner, and so size-wise, pound-wise, really about the same cuts of meat. And this was really about a third cheaper. I love brisket. Brisket's great to do, but it's harder to manage. It's harder to control. It's harder to get a good result with brisket just because of the size, the shape, the surface area of it. I mean, if you can do it right, it's dynamite, of course. But what I found is over the years is that the chuck roast is as good as far as taste, texture, and applications, similar to brisket, but it's cheaper. It's much easier to manage, both in size and configuration. It's got a little more volume to it versus a surface area, so it's just a more forgiving piece of meat to smoke, and in the end, to me, the results are as good as brisket. So what I'm going to do is stick a temperature probe in this guy. We're going to cook this one based on temperature. A lot of my smoking is based on time, especially pork products, but for this cut of meat, for the end result we want to achieve, we're going to go through several steps based on temperature. So I'm going to stick a probe in here, and then we'll put this guy onto the smoker and go to the next step. All right, so we've got our chuck roast on the smoker. I like to run between 250 and 275 for the chuck roast. You could go as low as really 225, but really no higher than 275. And that's a good zone to smoke this cut of meat in. I've got a few sticks of hickory down there on top of the charcoal. That's going to give me some additional smoke and flavor. And I've got my thermometer hooked up. I've got a probe into the meat, and then I've got a probe measuring the grill temperature. And it's a good, backup double check against the dial here on the grill, which is close but not perfect. And so really we're going to hang out like this for a while. What we want to do is smoke the meat in that temperature range, again 250 to 275, until the internal temperature hits 165 to 170 Fahrenheit. At that point, we're going to wrap it in pink butcher paper and then put it back on the smoker and keep cooking until the internal temperature gets into the range of 200 to 205 Fahrenheit. At which point I like to just turn off the heat and put the cut of meat in a cooler, in an oven, somewhere where it will stay warm, and then let it rest for about an hour. And what that's going to do is it's resting. Those different temperatures that we reach in the cooking process, they're going to break down the fat and the marbling and the connective tissue in this cut of meat, and it has a lot of that. It's going to break that down into the collagen and into like a gelatin texture. And by resting at an elevated temperature, generally 180 to 185, that connective tissue, that collagen, is going to continue to break down and keep the meat moist and add flavor and really just add some moisture to the meat. So the resting process is kind of as important as the smoking process. So we're going to let this hang out here for a while until we hit 165 to 170. Then we'll wrap it and go on to the next step. All right, so we just passed 165. I think I pulled it around 167, and this is the point where we're going to wrap this in the pink butcher paper. And this butcher paper is going to do a couple things. First, it's going to soak up any of the cooking juices and fat and melting collagen and stuff that's coming off the roast, and hold it close to the roast to moisturize it. But it's also going to let out steam. And this is something foil would not do. If you use foil, you're really going to end up braising the meat because the water and the moisture of the steam will stay in there. And this is going to let that out. And what that's going to do is that's going to help preserve our nice bark that you can see that we have here. So we'll go ahead and wrap this. And I like to do 2 layers. Flip it. And here we go, and this is ready to go back on the smoker now. Once it's on there, we will keep cooking this until it hits about 205. All right, so we just passed 205 in internal temperature, and this is ready to come off of the smoker. At this point, what I'm going to do is, let me disconnect my probe here. I'm going to put this inside in the oven at 180 just to rest for an hour. And then we'll come back and slice it up and see how things look. So stick around for that part. One last thing I wanted to mention, I get a lot of questions about how well this smoker does in terms of performance and heat. This total cook time turned out to be right about 6 hours. And by the way, that was a 3-pound chuck roast, so you're talking ballpark 2 hours per pound going through this procedure with these temperatures. But I've made it all 6 hours with the smoker. It was right at about 260 when I opened the hood there a second ago, so it's still holding temperature pretty well. If we peek down in the firebox, there's actually one little corner of glowing coals left, so it's about to peter out, but it did really well. It got me through the whole 6 hours. I didn't have to add any fuel. I did add, of course, sticks of hickory periodically to keep the smoke going, but overall it did well for a 6-hour smoke. So yeah, stick around. We'll come back in about an hour and slice this guy up and see how it looks.